you, Professor, for that presentation. I was wondering, since this research was done about 7 or 8 years ago, has this since been shared with MEE? I mean, have they been interested in this kind of scientific analysis? Because I would think that there are quite a few countries around the world that have conservation/user fees, and they've been able to successfully implement that program. I would think that would be, would be a relatively easy thing to implement in Maldives, given the financial challenges.
Yes, as I had mentioned, the reason I selected Baa Atoll was because the atoll ecosystem conservation project was being done in Baa Atoll, and I thought if there was any potential for this research to be used, it's through that project, because they were working on creating the biosphere reserve. So I had shared this with them once I completed, so my work was shared with them, and that's something actually I wonder about, because I'm not sure about the status of Digaliha, and I don't think they have a fee system yet in place. But for other MPAs, even to start such a thing, it's not happening. And as you said, it's been 7, 8 years since this work, and that's something I wonder. In many stakeholder consultations or resource management groups, people always talk about the lack of research, and so after funds and resources, lack of research is, I think, the next most popular. But I would think this is something that they could use, and this is done on the Maldives itself. So this research is there, but if it's not being used, why is it? So that's something I wonder, why is there that will to implement such things isn't there? So that's the question even I keep asking myself.
Let's call the minister right now, shall we?
So basically this information was actually shared with the ministry prior to the establishment of the Biosphere Reserve. And yet, Hanifaru Bay actually was the area which got the management plan.
Yeah.
Okay, wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
How do you see this management plan that you propose for Digaliha to be different from the management plan for Hanifaru Bay?
I'm not sure if Hanifaru, I haven't done any work on Hanifaru Bay, but I think the management plan for this may have been used by the project when developing. So because this is shared before, and I really don't know how there is the difference, but the elements which I looked at could be applied for any MPA. And as I had said in the beginning slides, Digaliha management was similar to any MPA, and even the conflicts I talked about between user groups, and the main reason was the lack of awareness. So that was something that was important in any MPA, and so I think these elements can be used, and depending on the different type of marine protected area, maybe size and things, there can be differences in how it can be implemented, but the elements can be used.
I had a quick question about the fee. I saw, you mentioned that the $50 was too high, but it's. Could you explain that a little more? Because it looks to me like it would be. It looks great to me at this end.
Yes, that's what I was saying is this is willingness to pay is from a hypothetical scenario. I told people this is not a real. So if this was the case, how much would you be willing to pay? So my fear is if there was an actual fee they have to pay, people will prefer a lower fee than a higher fee. So even though this graph shows the 50 is quite ideal, by having say $40 even, there will be more people willing to pay that much. and perhaps you can get more revenue generated by reducing to say 40. So 50, if there was say $50, that's how much people were oops. So this is how many people that are willing to pay. But if there was say 20, there's more people willing to pay. So maybe look at, we do bit of economic analysis, so what's the optimum, but I was saying is there's more people willing to pay if the fee was lower, and that to warn again that the willingness to pay actually may be higher than what people will be willing to pay. Is that clear?
You know, on the issue of willingness to pay, your research focused on willingness to pay as a separate, discrete fee. I wonder how interesting it would be to have some research done into how much people would be willing to pay if it wasn't a separate event, a separate charge, but rather part of the overall cost of coming to Maldives. I think the majority of the people who come to Maldives are, at least from our point of view, relatively affluent. And if there was a charge that was collected either at airport departure or as part of the process of obtaining visas, etc., in other words, if it was hidden in the cost of travel here, I bet you all of these financial calculations would be very much skewed in favor of higher rates. Have you thought about looking into that, or is there some comparable research that's been done elsewhere?
No, I don't think there had been a similar research here, but the payment vehicle itself is, as I said, depending on the payment vehicle, the willingness to pay does actually change. So that can be something that can be looked into. But some of the research shows, like in the Caribbean, people want to know that they are being charged for this, and they like to think in one of the marine parks, they give a sort of a token where it shows that they have visited this park which is being properly managed and marine. And they like to see, some of the people I talk to, they want to see brochures and things, information to show what is being done with their, so from just the people, I haven't actually done the research, but from the talking with participants, they're saying that it's just, like you said, being part of another charge is okay, but they'd still like to know they are being charged for this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've scuba dived on the Jacques Cousteau underwater marine park in Guadeloupe in the French West Indies, and the cost of diving includes a user fee for the marine park. And when you dive, there's brochures, exactly like you said, and it shows how much money was collected in the last 5, 6, 7 years, and what the money's been used for: research, science, a warden system. I mean, it's been very. I mean, for me, I felt like I was contributing something that was useful and beneficial, even though it was very expensive, but it was part of the overall cost of going scuba diving. It wasn't a separate ask. And I think if somebody was to ask me separate, could you pay an extra $50 for that? I can see why you get a table like this, as opposed to having it inclusive.
I had a quick question about the communities. I think the community's willingness to pay, I think it was related to, that I think you said that they weren't ready to answer the question. Could you expand upon that a little bit?
Yes. I think for Maldivians, why I said that was because they've been living in the environment, and why should they be like paying for using this environment? They've lived here historically for so long, and to ask that sort of question, first to actually understand what the question is asking, and that's why that the local community people are not ready for those kind of questions to be directly asking. are you willing to pay to see improved management here? And it's more because this is this natural resources, but something like waste management, there has been surveys done to see people's willingness to pay for implementing a waste management, say waste collection. So to actually have a system where the government or the municipality will collect the waste. So would people be willing to pay? They're paying for a service in terms of just maybe they are not using it. So and that's why I found it may not be the most appropriate way to ask willingness to pay, find how they value the reefs by directly asking. I thought that was not the best way. And for my later work, what I did was I used more in value interpretation. I looked at qualitatively how people use their resources, how they managed it, how they interacted with other users, how the users have changed historically, and from there interpreted what kind of values were more important to communities. For example, I visited the island of Kendu in Baa Atoll, and there the island people, the community stopped mining coral from their house reef on their own, no government rules. Now there is a state law which says you can't mine coral from the house reef, but even prior to that, the community stopped using for building their houses. They went to further reefs, so that which means they have more labor, more cost involved in taking a boat, but still they preferred to these further reefs to collecting coral from close by. This was because the community noticed that since they started taking coral, the island was eroding, and they linked it to this, and on their own, at that time there was the island development committees in each island, and they will be consulted by the island chiefs on any matter, and they thought this is the reason this is happening, so we should stop. So in my interpretation, whereas they valued the corals before for use for building their houses, for them now the protection value is more important than for just using for construction. So their value has changed from a use value to more the protection value is preferred. So that kind of more indirect valuation methods to find out how things have changed.
What about fishermen, using the water? I mean, that they're using the resource almost in the same way that the diver is. I mean, it's a different, obviously, but similar, the same token. Are fishermen accounted as a user, or are they paying user fees? Could they pay user fees?
They are a user, but they are not paying user fees. Again, this has come to traditionally in the Maldives. There's no law that, like say, people from one atoll can only fish in one atoll. They can move about. It's a common pool resource, and they can go anywhere. So it might be more difficult to implement these kind of user fees for fishermen.
Because of the nature of the historical context of it. Yeah.
And there probably will be a sort of quite opposition, because it's they have been using their resources, it's their land, their environment, and they have to pay for it. So I think more kind of awareness and these kind of things are needed for us to come to that stage.
So we actually had the opportunity to talk to the Ministry of Environment and Energy on the Baa Atoll Conservation Fund recently. So some of the takeaways we got were that the fund was mainly from voluntary contributions from resorts and dive centers and well-wishers, in addition to the user fees that the fund gets. And it sounded like the fund was centrally managed with some representation from atoll councils and the atoll council and island councils, and that the funds were not used just to monitor the protected areas, but also for livelihood activities for the communities, which they felt was important as well, because you want to give communities a sense that they are getting back from it directly. But the key takeaway was really that ME didn't seem to think that that conservation fund was the only model that you can use for the management plan, that you could also use directly community-led management plans. I don't know if such management plans exist, but I would just wonder if communities have the ability to actually, say, manage a fund, for example, or would they have the ability to kind of, would they have the knowledge and capacity to manage that fund transparently, and would they have the capacity to monitor their resources? I mean, how would it really work in practice? Given the Maldivian, communities, do you have any experiences with that?
I haven't worked with communities as such, but as from the consultations I had, and with some little experience, I've been to some communities and worked there with them, and think, as I had mentioned in the improved management scenario, the ministry should provide the necessary training for the people. So I think that training is very important. Right now, I don't think currently they would have the capacity to independently manage, but it's a very good thing for them to be involved in managing, but the training should be there. And I think that goes for even anybody, even in the ministry, who is coming to work. The necessary training is very important. I think we are closing, so thank you for the very interesting questions and very thought-provoking.